Captain Lee Miho watched the main screen. A grid of red dots moved steadily into the yellow zone on the map. The yellow zone was marked neutral territory. He knew each red dot was a warship of the Nigma Empire. They were not slowing down. The bridge of the Earth defense vessel Jeju was quiet. The only sounds were the soft beeps from control panels and the low hum of the ship's engines. Miho sat in his command chair. His hands were resting on the armrests. He did not move them. He needed to appear calm. His crew was watching him. His first officer, Park Soo-jin, stood next to him. She looked at her data tablet. "They have crossed the last marker, Captain," she said. Her voice was even, but Miho could hear the tension underneath. "The fleet is now fully inside the zone. Their weapons are powered. Shields are up." Miho nodded slowly. "Open a channel to the lead ship. Use the standard diplomatic frequency." "Channel open," said Kim Dae-ho from the communication station. Dae-ho was young, but his fingers moved with sure, quick taps on his screen. Miho took a slow breath. He spoke clearly. "Nigma Empire flagship, this is Captain Lee Miho of the Earth Defense Vessel Jeju. You are in violation of the Sirius Treaty. You must stop your advance and power down your weapons. Return to your territory. This is your final caution." They waited. The red dots kept moving. On the screen, the view from the external cameras showed the stars. Then, one of the red dots, much larger than the others, pulsed on the sensor map. "Incoming transmission," Dae-ho said. "Audio only." A voice filled the bridge. It was a translated voice, flat and without emotion. It sounded like a machine. "Organic vessel Jeju. Your warnings are irrelevant. The Nigma Empire expands where it wills. Your species is weak. Your territory will be made useful. Withdraw or be removed." The channel closed with a sharp click. Miho felt a cold anger settle in his stomach. He looked at Soo-jin. "Send the final ultimatum. The one from the council. The full text." Soo-jin worked her console. "Sending now. All frequencies. Tight beam and broadcast." The message was simple. It was the united voice of Earth. It stated the border laws. It listed the consequences of aggression. It ended with a clear choice. Yield or face a war you did not understand. Minutes passed. The Nigma fleet was now so close that the Jeju sensors could show the rough shapes of their ships. They looked like dark metal beetles, sharp and angular. "Any response?" Miho asked. "None," Dae-ho replied. "They are continuing their approach. Their weapon ports are aligning. They are targeting the Deep Space Relay Station, Gwangju." The Gwangju was an unarmed communications hub. It floated in the void between planets. It had a crew of 15 people. "Hail the Gwangju," Miho ordered, his voice tighter now. "Tell them to evacuate. Immediate emergency protocol." "Trying," Dae-ho said, his taps becoming frantic. "The Nigma are jamming all local frequencies. I can't get through." Miho stood up from his chair. "Helm, put us between the Nigma flagship and the relay station. Maximum thrust. Raise all shields." The pilot, Yoon Hana, reacted instantly. "Aye, Captain. Moving to intercept." The Jeju turned, its engines flaring. On the screen, the distance numbers shrank rapidly. But they were too far. They all knew it. They watched. The lead Nigma ship pulsed with a bright, green light along its side. A single beam of concentrated energy lanced out into the dark. It was silent in the vacuum of space, but on the bridge, the silent impact was louder than any explosion. The beam hit the Gwangju relay station. The station's simple metal frame glowed white-hot for a split second. Then it came apart. Pieces of metal and composite material flew out in a slow, expanding cloud. One moment it was there. The next it was just debris. 15 lives. Gone. The bridge was utterly silent. The crew stared at the screen, at the scattering debris where a human outpost had been. Miho sat back down. The cold anger was now a fire. He looked at the blinking icon of the Nigma flagship. They had not just chosen war. They had chosen annihilation. "Record for the ship's log," Miho said. His voice was hard, leaving no room for emotion. Sujin nodded, activating the recorder. Miho looked directly ahead, as if speaking to the Nigma Imperator itself. He said the words that would later be heard across human space. We cautioned the Nigma Empire to yield. He paused, thinking of the Guangzhou of the 15 names he would soon have to read. They chose war instead. He turned to his crew. Their faces were pale, but their eyes were fixed on him. They saw his resolve. Sujin, send a priority burst to Earth Command. Message: Guangzhou destroyed. Hostilities initiated by Nigma. Proceeding to Defensive Action Plan Weizong. Hannah, plot a retreat vector to the asteroid belt. We need distance. Daeho, keep trying to break their jamming. I want every nearby human vessel to know what happened here today. The Jeju began to move again, speeding away from the advancing wall of red dots. Behind them, the wreckage of the relay station drifted. It was a grave marker in the stars. The Nigma ships, seeing the Jeju retreat, pushed forward faster. They saw it as a confirmation of human weakness. They saw a prey animal running. Captain Miho watched them come on the sensor screen. He did not see weakness. He saw a target. And he saw a people who had just made the worst and last mistake of their existence. The bridge lights were a steady red. Alarm sirens had been silenced, but warning messages still flashed on every screen. The Jeju shook as another near-miss from the Nigma plasma cannons rocked its shields. Captain Miho held onto his command chair. The retreat was not a clean run. It was a desperate race. Shield strength at 40%, First Officer Sujin reported. Her voice was calm. A rock for the crew. Hull integrity is good. Their long-range accuracy is poor. They are not trying for precision, Miho said, watching the tactical display. They are trying to hurt us, to push us into a position where their main fleet can surround us. He turned to the pilot. Hannah, change course. Bearing 271, Mark III. Take us through the debris field of the old mining station. Aye, Captain, Hannah said. Her hands flew over her controls. The Jeju banked sharply to the left. Outside the viewport, the stars streaked. Behind them, the Nigma ships adjusted their pursuit on Earth. In a deep underground command center, General Park Jae-hyun stood before a large holographic table. The images of the Planetary Council members floated above it. They looked worried. One of them, an older woman, spoke first. General, the Jeju is damaged. The Nigma fleet will be in orbit within hours if nothing stops them. Our border defenses are not enough. Is Project Weizong ready? Or was it a waste of resources? Jae-hyun was a tall man with a stern face. He had spent 30 years preparing for a threat like this. He did not like war, but he was very good at it. It is ready, Jae-hyun said. His voice filled the quiet room. The Nigma believe they understand us. Their scouts have watched us for years. They have models of our behavior. They think we fight only from known military bases. They think we are predictable. He tapped a command into the table. The hologram changed. It showed the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Thousands of gray rocks tumbling in the dark. They see this as empty space, a navigational hazard. We see it as a shield. On the Jeju, Miho received the encoded signal. It was a single word, Weizong. He allowed himself a small, hard smile. Sujin, relay the activation command to all units in Sector Theta. Authentication code Echo 79er. Sending, Sujin said that in the asteroid belt, one particular rock, about the size of a small mountain, had drifted for decades. Sensors would show it was made of iron and nickel. To the Nigma fleet now entering the belt in pursuit of the Jeju, it was just another obstacle to fly around. Inside the asteroid, Pilot Officer Kim Jun was strapped into a cockpit. His entire world was a screen showing the sensor feed from the rock's surface. He had been living inside this fake rock for 4 months, waiting. He ate recycled food, he exercised in a tiny room, and he waited. When the command signal chimed in his ear, he jumped into action. Weizong Unit 3, activating, he said, his voice echoing in the small space. Outside, the asteroid's surface cracked open. Sections of rock folded away, revealing polished black metal beneath. A massive plasma cannon, longer than 3 buses, powered up. Its targeting sensors locked onto the heat signatures of the approaching Nigma destroyers. The lead Nigma ship did not even notice. It was focused on the fleeing Jeju. Its commander saw the strange energy reading from the asteroid, but by the time the data was processed, it was too late. June pressed the firing trigger. A line of blue-white energy, hotter than the sun, shot across the void. It struck the lead Nigma destroyer in its engine section. The alien ship did not explode. It simply came apart like a toy hit by a hammer. Chunks of metal spun away into the dark. On the bridge of the Jeju, the crew cheered. Miho did not cheer. He watched. "One down," he muttered. Chaos erupted in the Nigma formation. Their neat, aggressive line broke apart. Ships turned sharply, trying to find the new threat. 3 more asteroids in their path split open. Each one revealed a hidden weapon platform. Beams of energy and volleys of guided missiles shot out. The Nigma ships fired back, but their weapons were designed for ship-to-ship combat. The Huizong platforms were fortified, built into the heart of the asteroids. The Nigma bolts slammed into rock and metal, doing little damage. "Their formation is breaking," Hannah called out from the helm. "They are scattering. Do not let them regroup," Miho ordered. "Bring us about. Target the ship on the far left. The shields are fluctuating." The Jeju, no longer running, turned to face the enemy. Its own cannons fired, joining the storm of fire from the hidden platforms. On Earth, General Jaehyun watched the same battle on his hologram. Green dots for Huizong platforms. Red dots for Nigma ships. The red dots were blinking out one by one. The council members were silent now, watching the counterattack they had been told was possible but had never believed in. "They did not expect this," one councilman whispered. "No," Jaehyun agreed. "They thought they were hunting a sheep. They walked into a wolf's den." Back in the belt, the fight was brutal and short. 4 Nigma destroyers were completely destroyed. 2 more were crippled, drifting without power. The remaining 5 ships turned and fled, jumping into faster-than-light travel to escape. Suddenly, space was quiet again. The only signs of the battle were the drifting pieces of broken ships and the now exposed Huizong platforms, their weapons glowing with heat. Inside Unit 3, Kim Jun unclenched his hands from the controls. His heart was pounding. He took a deep breath of the recycled air. On his screen, he saw the Jeju, small and brave against the stars. He opened a channel. "Huizong 3 to Jeju. The sector is clear." Captain Miho's voice came back, steady and clear. "Well done, Huizong. Hold position. And thank you." Miho leaned back in his chair. The immediate threat was over. But on the main screen, a new, larger group of red dots was gathering at the edge of the sensor range. The main Nigma armada had arrived. The first skirmish was won. The real war was just beginning. They had shown the Empire their teeth. Now the Empire would come back with its claws. The silence after a battle was always strange. On the Jeju, the crew moved with quiet purpose. They checked for damage. They made small repairs. They monitored the distant Nigma armada that now hung just outside the asteroid belt, like a storm waiting to break. Captain Miho knew this was only a pause. The enemy was studying them, learning from its mistake. While soldiers and pilots rested, the other front of the war was opening. Far from the asteroid belt, on a small science station orbiting a cold, blue planet, a different kind of work began. Researcher Choi Daeho was not a soldier. He was a man who loved patterns. He worked with signals, with data, with the invisible languages of the universe. His station was remote and quiet, perfect for listening to the stars. When the war started, his job changed. His new task was to listen to the enemy. A week earlier, a damaged Nigma scout ship had been disabled by a Huizong mine. It had not exploded. It had been crippled, its crew killed by the vacuum, but its main computer core was mostly intact. A salvage team had dragged the wreckage and parked it next to Daeho's station. It was a strange, angular piece of darkness against the clean white of the station's hull. Now, Daeho floated inside the wreckage. His suit lights cut through the dark. The inside of the Nigma ship was all sharp angles and smooth, seamless surfaces. There were no chairs, no beds, no screens as humans understood them. He found the main computer node, a crystal-like structure pulsing with a faint inner light. Very carefully, he disconnected it and placed it in a sealed container. Back inside the station, in his clean lab, Daeho went to work. His assistant, a young woman named Lee Yuna, helped him. They scanned the crystal. They sent tiny pulses of energy through it. They recorded every signal, every response. For days, they found nothing useful. The data was encrypted in a way their computers could not break. It was like hearing a conversation through a thick wall. You knew people were talking, but the words were just muffled sounds. Daeho was about to take a break when Yuna noticed something. "The signals," she said, pointing to her screen. "They are not random. Look at the rhythm." Daeho looked. She was right. The pulses of data from the crystal had a pattern. It was a rigid, repeating rhythm, like a drumbeat. He had been looking for meaning in the words, but the meaning was in the beat. He remembered something from an old report on Nigma biology. They were insectoid, and they communicated not with spoken words, but with complex vibrations. Their whole society was built on strict, unchanging hierarchies of frequency. What if, Daeho said slowly, their technology works the same way? What if their computers, their ships, even their weapons, they all operate on a principle of perfect, predictable rhythm? A chain of command made of sound. Yuna's eyes widened. To break the chain, you would not need a bigger weapon. You would just need noise. Not just noise, Daeho said, an idea forming in his mind. Chaos, the one thing their rigid minds cannot process. He started typing furiously. They think in straight lines. We think in scribbles. He did not try to break their code. Instead, he started to build a new signal. He called it the chaos stream. It was not a weapon to burn or blast. It was a data virus, but not one that would destroy machines. He designed it to attack the Nigma mind. He took recordings. A child laughing uncontrollably. A piece of jazz music where the saxophone wandered free and wild. The sound of a busy Seoul street market, with 100 people talking, selling, arguing, all at once. He took readings of human brainwaves during dreams. He took the irregular, beautiful pattern of a heartbeat. He mixed it all together. He made it loud and soft, fast and slow, predictable and then suddenly random. It was the sound of human life. It was messy, emotional, and illogical. He finished the program. He looked at Yuna. "We need to broadcast this. Aim it at their command ships, their leaders." Yuna bit her lip. Will it work? Or will it just make them angry? Daeho looked at the dark crystal from the Nigma ship, sitting silent on the lab table. They believe in perfect order. They think our adaptability is a weakness because it is not efficient. They cannot understand it. So let's make them feel it. Let's see if their perfect minds can swim in our ocean of chaos. He sent the file and his report to General Jaehyun on Earth. He did not know if the military would use it. It was not a gun or a shield. Back on the Jeju, Captain Miho received a priority message. It was marked from General Jaehyun, and attached was a large file labeled Chaos Protocol. Miho opened it and read Daeho's report. He listened to a short sample of the chaos stream. To his human ears, it was just a confusing mix of sounds. But he understood the theory. He looked at the main screen, at the massive Nigma armada gathering its strength. They would attack soon, and this time they would be ready for the asteroid defenses. First Officer Soo-jin, Miho said, prepare a tight beam transmission for all Weizong platforms and our fleet. New orders. When the Nigma attack again, I want every ship and platform to broadcast this signal. On all frequencies. Maximum power. We will not just fight their ships. We will fight their minds. Soo-jin read the orders. She did not smile, but a light of understanding came into her eyes. Aye, Captain. Loading the Chaos Protocol into all broadcast systems. The Jeju and the hidden platforms waited. The Nigma armada began to move, a slow, terrible wave of red dots advancing into the asteroid belt. They thought they were going to crush a clever, but ultimately predictable enemy. They did not know that humanity was about to fight them with a song. The Nigma armada moved forward like a wall of dark metal. This time they did not rush. Their ships moved in perfect, slow formation. They fired first not at the Jeju but at the asteroids themselves. Powerful green beams sliced through space, vaporizing entire rocks. They were clearing the field, destroying the Weizong platforms before they could even open fire. On the bridge of the Jeju, the crew watched the destruction. Captain Miho felt a cold knot in his stomach. The Empire had learned. Their arrogance was gone, replaced by a cold, methodical logic. Platform 2 is gone, Sujin reported, her voice flat. Platform 5 is taking heavy fire. They are targeting the asteroids with the highest metal content. Order all remaining platforms to open fire, Miho said, and begin the broadcast. Full power. All frequencies. Engineer Park Kyung, who was manning the communication station, nodded. His fingers flew over the console. Activating Chaos Protocol. Broadcasting now. There was no visible beam, no flash of light. But across every radio wave, laser pulse, and data frequency, the chaotic stream of human noise began to flow. It washed over the advancing Nigma fleet. At first, nothing happened. The Nigma ships continued their slow, destructive advance. Another asteroid, and the Weizong platform inside it, dissolved into dust. Then the first irregularity appeared. A Nigma destroyer on the left flank of their formation suddenly veered off course. It turned sharply, for no reason, and began moving away from the battle. "Look at that," Hannah said from the helm, pointing at her screen. Another ship, a medium-class cruiser, stopped firing. It just hung in space, its engines idle. Its weapon ports closed, then opened, then closed again, as if confused. "It's working," Sujin whispered. But not all the ships were affected. The largest vessels in the center of the armada pushed forward, their shields glowing brighter. "The signal is not getting through their heavier shields," Kyung reported. "They have adjusted. Only the smaller, outer ships are fully vulnerable." Miho watched, thinking fast. The chaos was a tool, but it was not a weapon by itself. "We need to get the signal through their shields. We need to make it sticky." Kyung looked up, an idea crossing his face. "Our targeting beams. We use them to carry the signal. When we fire our plasma cannons, we can overlay the chaos stream onto the beam's carrier wave. It would be like painting their shields with noise." "Do it," Miho ordered immediately. "Modify all weapons, ours and the remaining platforms. Fire for effect, but broadcast with every shot." The Jeju shuddered as its main cannons fired. The bolts of blue plasma streaked toward a large Nigma battleship. This time, when the plasma hit the enemy's shields, something else hit too. The embedded chaos signal crawled across the energy barrier, finding tiny fluctuations, and seeped through. On the Nigma battleship, the effect was not an explosion. The ship did not break apart. Instead, it began to act strangely. It rotated slowly, then fired its engines at full power in the wrong direction, crashing into the ship next to it. The two colossal vessels scraped together in a shower of sparks and broken metal. Chaos spread through the Nigma fleet like a virus. Ships that were supposed to protect each other turned their weapons on allies. Some spun in helpless circles. Others fired wildly into empty space. Their perfect formation collapsed into a confused, noisy mess. "They're breaking," Hannah called out, a note of triumph in her voice. But Miho kept his eyes on the central command ship. It was the largest vessel, hanging back. It was not joining the fray. It was watching, studying. He could feel the gaze of the Nigma Imperator from across the void. The Empire was not defeated. It was shocked, confused, but it was learning again. "Don't let up," Miho commanded. "Concentrate fire on any ship that looks like it's regaining control. Keep them off balance." For the next hour, space was a light show of misdirected fire and drifting ships. The human forces, coordinated and clear-minded, picked off the disoriented Nigma vessels one by one. It was not a battle of strength anymore. It was a battle of minds, and the human mind, adaptable and chaotic, was winning. Finally, a signal came from the Nigma command ship. Not a weapon, but a wideband order. The remaining Nigma ships, those that could still move, disengaged. They turned and began a ragged, disorderly retreat back to the edge of the belt. They left behind broken ships and clouds of debris. The Jeju did not pursue. The crew was tired. Their ship was damaged. They had won the second battle. On the bridge, the mood was quiet, not joyful. They had seen something new. They had seen an enemy break not from force, but from confusion. It felt strange, almost unsettling. Sujin looked at the main screen, at the retreating red dots. "What did we do to them?" she asked quietly. Miho leaned back in his chair. He felt no pride, only a deep, cold responsibility. "We showed them a mirror," he said, "and in it they saw something they could not understand. They saw a mind that is not a straight line, but a wild, tangled forest. And they are afraid of getting lost." He knew the fear would not last. The Nigma Imperator had seen their new weapon. It would now work day and night to find a defense against it, to build a shield against chaos. The war had just changed. It was no longer about guns and shields. It was about the fundamental nature of thought itself. And the next move belonged to the Empire. The broken fleet returned to the edge of Nigma space. The chaos signal did not follow. In the quiet dark between stars, the Imperator analyzed the failure. Its mind, a network of pure logic, processed the data. The human weapon was not energy. It was information, a destructive, illogical pattern. To defend, it needed a sample. It needed to understand the chaos. A new order went out. A single scout ship, small and fast and equipped with the strongest new frequency filters, was to approach human space. It was not to attack. It was to observe, to record the chaotic signal from a safe distance and return. The mission was simple. But space is not simple. As the scout ship skimmed the orbit of Mars, a piece of ancient debris, a forgotten screw from a human mining drone, floated in its path. It was a tiny thing. The scout ship's shields were tuned to block energy, not physical junk. The screw hit at a bad angle, piercing a fuel line. The ship lurched, its engines sputtering. It lost control. The dying ship's automatic systems kicked in. It fired its emergency thrusters, aiming for the nearest solid ground to attempt a landing. It streaked like a falling star into the thin, red atmosphere of Mars. On the surface, in a human research base called Tharsis Station, Sergeant Kong Taeyong saw the flash on the horizon. He was outside checking the perimeter sensors. The sky lit up with a greenish trail of fire, followed by a distant, ground-shaking thump. "Control, this is Taeyong," he said into his helmet radio. "I have visual on an uncontrolled impact. Bearing 045, approximately 10 clicks out. It's not one of ours." Inside the base, the alert sounded. Taeyong's squad was scrambled. 10 minutes later, they were speeding across the rusty Martian plain in an armored rover. Dust plumed red behind them. They found the crash site in a shallow valley. The Nigma scout ship was a crumpled, black wedge, half buried in the dirt. Steam hissed from broken parts. It was eerily quiet. "Form a perimeter," Taeyong ordered his squad. "Weapons ready, but do not fire unless fired upon." He approached the main hull, his rifle raised. There was a crack in the metal wide enough to enter. His flashlight beam cut through the dusty air inside. The interior was strange. No chairs, no consoles. Just smooth surfaces and crystalline nodes that were now dark. And there, in the center, he saw them. 2 Nigma beings. They were smaller than he expected, about his size. Their bodies were insect-like, with a hard, glossy carapace. One was clearly dead, its body broken by the crash. The other was moving slightly, one of its 4 limbs twitching. A faint, pained clicking sound came from it. Taeyong had seen pictures, but facing the real thing was different. This was the enemy, the one who had destroyed the Gwangju and killed countless others. His finger tightened on the trigger of his rifle. The being's head turned. It had large, multifaceted eyes that reflected his flashlight beam. It made no move to attack. It just clicked weakly, a rhythmic, broken sound. "Sergeant," a voice said in his ear. It was Medic Park Jaiwan coming up behind him. I have a bioscanner. The life signs are faint, but it's alive. It's the enemy, Jaiwan, Taeyang said, his voice hard. It's injured, Jaiwan replied simply. She moved past him, her medical kit in hand. She knelt near the Nigma being, careful not to touch it. She scanned it with her device. It has internal damage. A fracture in its… well, I think that's its chest. Taeyang watched, his rifle still aimed. What are you doing? My job, Jaiwan said. She opened her kit. She didn't have anything designed for Nigma biology, but pain and shock were universal. She prepared a basic sedative and a tissue sealant. Very slowly, she reached out. The Nigma being flinched, a sharp movement. This clicking grew faster, higher pitched. Fear, Taeyang realized. It was afraid. Jaiwan spoke softly, as if to a scared animal. It's okay. I'm just going to help. She administered the sedative through a patch on a part of its carapace that seemed less hard. The clicking slowed. The being grew still, its eyes dimming. She worked for 20 minutes, sealing the worst of the leaks in its body with the sealant foam. It was basic, just enough to stabilize it. Finally, she sat back. It won't die. Not today, anyway. They transported the unconscious being back to Tharsa Station. They put it in a sealed quarantine room with an air mix that matched its ship's readings. They watched it through a thick glass window. Hours later, it woke up. It moved slowly around the empty room, touching the walls with its delicate limbs. Seemed confused, lost. Jaiwan had an idea. She had taken a small device from the wreckage, a simple Nigma data reader. She connected it to a human translation computer. Took a while, but the computer started to find patterns. Basic words. Taeyang stood with her outside the window. They watched as the being sat in the middle of the room, its body perfectly still. It's not trying to escape, Taeyang observed. It doesn't know what to do, Jaiwan said. Its rules are broken. It's alone. Jaiwan took the translation device, now linked to a speaker in the room. She typed a simple, pre-translated message. The computer emitted a series of rhythmic clicks and buzzes. The Nigma being jerked, its head snapping toward the speaker. The message played. You are injured. You are safe. The being was silent for a long time. Then, it moved to the device they had left in the room for it to respond. Tapped at it with a thin limb. A translated voice, flat and mechanical, came from the speaker on Jaiwan's side. Query. Why is unit not terminated? Logic dictates elimination of captured enemy. Taeyang and Jaiwan looked at each other. Jaiwan typed her reply. You were hurt. We help. Another long pause. The being clicked again. The translated voice returned, but this time, the flat tone seemed to carry a hint of something else. Bewilderment. Secondary query. The chaos signal. The illogic. It breaks the rhythm. It breaks the mind. Why do you not break under your own chaos? The question hung in the air. Taeyang stared at the creature, this soldier from a ruthless empire. It wasn't asking about weapons or tactics. It was asking about them, about what it meant to be human. Jaiwan didn't have an answer the computer could translate. She just typed the only truth she knew. We are the chaos. We live in it. It is our home. The Nigma being turned away from the window. It retreated to the far corner of the room and became still again. But the question it had asked echoed far beyond the quarantine room. It was a question that would change everything. The report from Mars reached General Jaehyun on Earth. He read the transcript from Tharsa Station several times. The Nigma soldier's question burned in his mind. Why do you not break under your own chaos? He called a secure meeting with Captain Miho, still on the Jeju near the asteroid belt. Miho's face on the screen looked tired, but his eyes were sharp. They don't understand sacrifice, Jaehyun said, getting straight to the point. Their prisoner sees our chaos as a weapon we use, a tool. It doesn't realize it's not something we use. It's what we are. Their society is a machine. Ours is a living thing. A machine fights for function, for resources. A living thing fights to survive, to protect its home. Miho nodded slowly, understanding. They see our planets as territory. They don't see Earth as a home. They don't understand why we fight harder when we're defending, not attacking. Exactly, Jaehyun said. They have a fatal flaw in their logic. They can model our technology. They can eventually find a shield for our chaos signal. But they cannot model our spirit. They cannot calculate why a soldier would throw himself on a grenade for others. To them, it is wasted material. Illogical. A plan began to form in the silence between them. It was not a plan from a standard military manual. It was something bolder and far more dangerous. We can't win a war of attrition against their whole empire, Miho said. They have more ships, more resources. We have won 2 fights because we surprised them. They will not be surprised a 3rd time. Then we don't fight the 3rd fight they expect, Jaehyun replied. We don't try to destroy their fleet. We make their entire reason for fighting seem illogical to them. How? Miho asked. We show them the chaos up close, not as a broadcast but as a fact. We board the Imperator's flagship. We don't go to kill him. We go to talk. Miho leaned back, stunned. It was a suicide mission. The flagship would be at the heart of the largest armada ever assembled. Getting there was impossible. Getting inside was madness. They will see it as an attack, Miho said. It is an attack, Jaehyun agreed. But not on their ship, on their understanding. We take the chaos to their doorstep. We make them look at it in the eyes of people who are not afraid of it. We answer their soldiers' question not with words, but with action. The plan, once spoken, took on a terrible clarity. It was a desperate gamble. But all war was a gamble. On the Jeju, volunteers were called for. Miho did not order anyone. He explained the mission. They would take a small, fast shuttle modified to be as stealthy as possible. They would slip through the Nigma lines during the next inevitable attack. They would try to dock with the flagship. They would likely die. Every hand on the bridge went up. Hana, the pilot. Sujin, the first officer. Even Engineer Kyung. Miho shook his head. The ship needs you. The fleet needs you. He chose a smaller team. Sergeant Taeyong volunteered immediately from Mars. He had looked the enemy in the eye. He wanted to finish the conversation. Pilot Yoon Hana argued until she was blue in the face that no one could fly the shuttle like she could. Miho finally agreed. The 3rd volunteer was a surprise. Researcher Choi Dae-ho, from his lonely science station, requested to join. I built the chaos, he said in his message. I should be the one to deliver it in person. They need to see the face of the man who made the noise. They need to see he is not a monster, just a curious man. The team was set. Taeyong the soldier, Hana the pilot, Dae-ho the scientist. Weeks passed. The Nigma armada regrouped and refined its filters. A new kind of ship appeared at its front, vessels emitting a constant, dull pulse designed to cancel out irregular signals. The shield against chaos. They began their advance again, slower, more careful, but unstoppable. The time came. The human fleet, smaller and battered, prepared for what everyone thought would be a last stand. Their job was not to win. It was to be loud, to be chaotic, to draw every bit of attention. A space again filled with flashing lights and the new, muted roar of battle. A single dark shuttle slipped away from the Jeju. It was called the Gideon. Hana flew it not like a ship, but like a shadow, ducking behind debris, using the energy flares of the battle to hide its engine signature. Inside, Taeyong checked his weapons, not knowing if he would use them. Dae-ho held a data drive containing the pure, unrefined chaos stream. He looked calm. They weaved through the chaos of the great battle, a tiny speck moving toward the largest, most dangerous ship in the enemy fleet. The Nigma Imperator's flagship loomed ahead, a mountain of dark metal and green light, surrounded by circles of guards. Their mission was impossible. It was madness. It was the most human thing anyone had ever tried to do. They were not going to win a war with a gun. They were going to try and win it with an idea. And to deliver it, they had to walk right into the heart of the enemy. The Gideon shook violently as a shockwave from a nearby explosion rocked it. Hana's hands were steady on the controls, her eyes glued to the screen. The shuttle was little more than a sensor ghost, a blur of heat and shadow against the colossal backdrop of the battle. Her path was a frantic dance through the wreckage of ships and the streaking light of plasma fire. "Their perimeter is tightening," she said, her voice tense. "The guard ships are holding a perfect formation. I can't find a gap." In the back, Sergeant Taeyong watched the tactical display. The Imperator's flagship was a fortress. "There has to be a weakness. Nothing is perfect." Researcher Daeho leaned forward, peering at the data feed. "He's right. Look, their new dampening field, the one blocking our chaos signal. It's emitting a constant pulse. See the rhythm?" He pointed to a wave pattern on the screen. "It's perfect. Too perfect. It creates a tiny sensor shadow on its own lower hull, right at the emission point. A blind spot." Hannah didn't ask if he was sure. She just adjusted course. The Gideon Dove, skimming so close to the hull of a drifting Nigma cruiser that Taeyong heard the scrape of metal. Then she pushed the engines, shooting straight for the flagship's underbelly, aiming for the dead zone in its own perfect defenses. Alarms blared on the Gideon. Proximity warnings. Targeting locks that flickered and died as they hit the dampening field. The huge black hull of the flagship filled the viewport, rushing at them. "Brace for impact," Hannah yelled. It wasn't a crash, but a hard, magnetic grapple. She had activated the shuttle's emergency docking clamps. They slammed into the Nigma hull with a jolt that threw them against their harnesses. They were stuck there, like a bug on a wall. "They know we're here," Taeyong said, unstrapping himself. He grabbed his rifle and a cutting torch. "The clock starts now." They burned through the hull. The metal was strong, but the torch was designed for emergencies. Took long, sweating minutes. Finally, a section fell inward with a crash. They were looking into a dim, green-lit corridor. The air that rushed out was cold and smelled like ozone. They moved in, Taeyong first, his rifle sweeping the passage. The interior was silent and empty. It was wrong. On a human ship, there would be alarms, running crew, Marines. Here, there was nothing. It was unnerving. They followed Daeho's portable scanner, which was picking up the strongest energy source deep in the ship's core. The command chamber. They ran through the maze of smooth corridors, their boots making the only sound. Finally, they reached a vast doorway. It was sealed, but as they approached, it slid open without a sound. They stepped inside. The chamber was immense. In the center, bathed in a column of pulsating green light, was the Nigma Imperator. It was not a single being, but a cluster of shifting, crystalline forms, connected by strands of glowing energy. It had no face, no body as they knew it. It was a living mind made visible around the chamber. Standing perfectly still were rows of Nigma soldiers. They did not move to attack. They simply watched as a translated voice, deep and resonant, filled the room, came from everywhere. "You are the chaos." Taeyong raised his rifle, but Daeho put a hand on his arm. "No," the researcher whispered. He stepped forward, holding up the data drive. "We are," Daeho said, his voice surprisingly loud in the huge space. "And we are here to talk." "Talk is irrelevant," the Imperator's voice boomed. "You have come to be terminated. A logical end for illogical beings." At that moment, Captain Miho's voice, transmitted from the Jeju, echoed in the chamber through their comms. Hannah patched it to the shuttle's external speaker. "You were warned," Miho's voice said, clear and hard. "You saw our chaos as weakness. You were wrong. It is our strength. We can drown your entire species in it. We can make your perfect logic scream until it breaks. Or you can yield." The Imperator's light flickered. On the view screens that lined the walls, images appeared. They were live feeds from the battle outside. But the feeds were changing. The human ships, though outnumbered, were fighting with terrible, unpredictable ferocity. Ships performed maneuvers that made no tactical sense, yet survived. The chaos stream, though dampened, was still leaking through, carried on laser comms and even radiation from damaged hulls. The Imperator saw its own ships, those touched by the chaos, acting erratically. It saw the cost of this fight. not in ships, but in the very order that held its empire together. It turned its attention to the three small humans in its chamber. A soldier, ready to fight to the death for a cause. A pilot who had flown an impossible path. A scientist who had weaponized music and dreams. They were afraid. He could sense their biosigns, but they stood firm. They were willing to die, not for territory, not for resources, but for an idea. For the safety of their chaotic, messy, beautiful home. That was the final, unsolvable equation. That was the chaos it could not filter out. The Imperator's light dimmed. The soldiers around the room took a step back, in unison. The deep voice spoke again, but the resonance was gone. It was just a sound, flat and defeated. The calculation is complete. Further engagement offers no logical benefit. Only dissolution. The word hung in the air. It meant the end of their order, their way of being. The Imperator's form seemed to shrink slightly. The Nigma Empire yields. The word echoed. Yields. On the screens, the Nigma ships all disengaged at once. The firing stopped. The Great Armada began to pull back, turning away from the asteroid belt, away from Earth. Taeyong lowered his rifle, his hands trembling. Hannah let out a breath she felt she'd been holding for hours. Daeho just nodded, as if a difficult experiment had concluded. The war was over. Weeks later, on the repaired Jeju, First Officer Sujin updated the official log. The treaty was being signed. The Nigma fleet was in full retreat, heading back to its own distant stars. In the ship's mess hall. The mood was quiet. Pilot Hannah and researcher Daeho, who had been transferred to the Jeju, sat together with simple meals. They did not talk of victory or empires. Hannah spoke of her family's restaurant in Busan, of the sound of the waves. Daeho talked about wanting to listen to the stars again, just to hear their music, not to find weapons in it. They were ordinary people again. That was the true victory. Outside the viewport, the stars were calm and silent. The Nigma Empire had been cautioned. It had chosen war. And in doing so, it had learned the terrible, wonderful weight of the human spirit. A spirit that could not be calculated, could not be broken, and would always, always protect its home. The galaxy would remember the choice that was offered, and the cost of ignoring it.